Hey YouTube and welcome to Silent Code Dev. Welcome to day 70 of becoming a front-end developer from zero. So now we're going to be working on the array for each method, I guess. So I think I'm going to write this down because there's some important things to know about this. So we're going to do 6 arrays, and inside we're going to do array for each. Okay, so array iteration is one of the most, because the thing is, like, when I start learning something, the issue I have is that I start mixing everything up, you know. I confuse for each with map, and that's because I don't have like a clear understanding of what each of them do. It's like having a toolbox and you have different tools and you kind of know how to use the tools, but you don't really know how each tool work, right? So yeah, that's kind of the issue I have. Okay, so yeah, okay, so I have a bit of time. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna read. Okay, so array iteration is one of the most important concepts that you will use in JavaScript. Let's say we have an array of grades and you would like to loop or iterate over every item in this array. Here's how you would do that in JavaScript. So const grades 10, 8, 13, grades for each grade, do something with individual grade. So always start with a console log for inside your for each, so that you can visualize the shift from an array to array item. So the for each callback method allows you to run the callback function for every item in the array. So callbacks will be explained in more depth in the following chapter. For now, let's start with the basic definition. So a callback is a function definition passed as a parameter to another function. In our example above, here is the callback function. So this callback function receives a grade and then logs it to the console. This is a function definition because it's not being executed. It only defines the behavior of the function. However, this function definition is passed as an argument to the for each method. Okay. So grades for each, insert callback here. Once you combine the two together, as in pass the function definition as an argument to for each method, then you get grades for each function, grade, console log grade, and this, let me see, grade, and then logs to the console this function definition, because it's not blah blah blah. It only defines the behavior of the function. However, the function definition is passed. Okay. All right. So yeah. So call the callback with grade 10. Grades. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm like, okay, you put console log grades in there and it's gonna log 10. Oh, okay. So a common question when learning about callbacks is, how does JavaScript know that grades becomes grade in the callback parameter? The answer, it doesn't. What matters is the position and order of the parameters. So JavaScript doesn't really care what you call your variables. It will always, in the case of for each, look at the first parameter you define in your callback function and pass to it the correct value. So the code below does work, but please don't use it. Yeah. So this works because JavaScript will look for the first parameter and it will call the callback and give a value to X every time. So even though it works, you should always give a clear variable names. Okay, so yeah, what can we write about for each? So for each, yeah, so it allows us to run a callback function for every item in the array. Right, so it's a function that for each is something that you do something to each individual item in the array, right? You target each individual. So I can write that. So the array, so the for each method does something to each individual items in an array. We can have an example. Const x equals 1, 2, 3, and then we can do x for each item. Console log. This is gonna give us 1, 2, and 3. All right. Yeah, so there's not really much. It's just gonna do something to each individual, right? So for each callback iterates over every item in an array. A callback is a function definition passed as a parameter to another function. Always start with a console log inside the for each to visualize the shift, right? The for each method will take your function definition and call it for every item of the array. So every time the callback is called, the first parameter will represent the corresponding array item. And we have some tasks, so I'm going to restart. And so loop through array elements. So complete the function loop through elements such that it iterates over every item in the elements. It receives and logs it to the console. Okay, so for each element, you want to console log element Okay, so here we have log user IDs. Complete the function log users IDs such that it iterates over every item in the user IDs array. It receives and logs it to the console using console log. Okay, so yeah, it's the same as this before, right? So user IDs for each user ID. Okay, what happened? User IDs for each user ID, console log user ID. Okay, so return confusion. So in this lesson, we'll cover a common confusion when it comes to returning inside a function that contains a for each call. But first, let's talk a bit more about naming variables when iterating. So naming, yeah, this one I know, but we're just gonna read it. So naming variables with a clear name makes it much easier for you and others to understand the code. This is especially true with iteration. Thus, it's always a good idea to use the plural for the array because there are more than one item usually, and singular for the item of the array. Here are some good examples. Grades, item is grade. People, item is person. So it may sound like it's a minor tip, but it makes a big difference. Here is a code example based on the above. So yeah, cons grades 10, 14, 15. So grades for each grade, console log grade. Cons people, Sam, Alex. People for each person, console log person. So returning from loop. There's a common mistake that occurs when you try to return from a function that contains a for each call. That's because there are two functions. Let's say you have this function log users IDs. So user IDs for each user ID console log user ID, and you would like this function to return true when it's completed. Where do you place the return true? Would it be or so if we take a step back, the return keyword returns from its own function. Thus, the first approach does not work because you're returning from the callback function that the for each receives. This will not return from the log users IDs. So, okay, so the correct answer is the second option. Yeah, because it's outside. So thus the correct answer is the second option. Function log user IDs. User IDs for each function user ID, console log user ID. So we are returning because we have two. Yeah, now I see it. Because we have two functions and the return keyword returns from its own function. Thus, the first approach does not work because you're returning from the callback function that the for each receives. Yeah, so you need to return from the original function. So the return true inside function is not really useful because it's going to return from the callback function. But there is no more code inside that function anyway. Yeah, so it's going to return from the other function anyways. So the next iteration of the for each will still occur. Also, the for each method will always return undefined, no matter what you return inside of it. Okay. So one more example. So let's take a look at an educational example to make sure you understand. So what do you think this function log rates will return once it's called? Okay, let's think. So this is gonna return 10, but this function, I actually don't know. And this is going to return, sorry, oh my god, of course it's going to return undefined because it doesn't matter what you put there, it's not going to return from the function there, so it's going to return 20. Yeah, it's returning from the outer function. And yeah, we're just going to write that down. So the return, so you're gonna do true inside function is not really because it's going to return from the callback. It says for each method will always return undefined no matter what you return inside of it. Okay. Yeah, so what I get is that if you want something returned, you have to return from the outer function. So I'm just gonna write that. Oops. So something you must use the keyword on the outer function, not inner slash callback. So recap, name your arrays in plural, blah, blah, blah. Make sure to correctly place the return inside a function that contains for each, right? So, okay. So now we're starting to get somewhere. So complete the function sum grades such that it returns the sum of all the grades it receives as a parameter. We haven't seen reduce yet, so try to solve it using what you have learned so far. So yeah, I mean this one is simple, right? So we are receiving an array with numbers. We want to collect them together. We want to return the sum. So we're gonna do grades for each grade, and it's tempting to write return there, right? So what do we want to do? We want to plus everything together, right? So I don't know if I have to write grades. No. Console log grade. Why do we get undefined? For each grade. Like, that's definitely not working. No, it's not. No. Oh. we want to add grades. We want to add it to, let's see, grades plus equal grade. Oh, we have a browser, so I don't know if we have to. No. So I don't know how I'm gonna do that. I need to think. Okay, let's use hint. Okay, so I need to create a variable, sorry. So we can create a const, not const but let, because the, let's see, const sum. So sum. I'm not sure what to do here. Some. Oh my god. I don't know. Let's see, sum equals sum plus grade. It's not working. Oh. Fuck. But isn't that's what I tried to do, right? Yeah, that's what I did. Plus equal. So sum plus, because you want a plus, you get the value of 1, and then you add again. Right? Yeah. So that was we need to return sum.
Dette en henstilling til alle passasjerer.
Okay, so I think I figured out what I did wrong. So because I used console log here, it confused me. And so what I have to do is I have to do it here, and then I have to return the sum. I got it. So we do the operation here, and we are getting the entire thing. Because if you try to do it here, we are gonna get undefined, right? and you get undefined either way, I think. Yeah. So we get down sum plus equal grade, and then we want to return sum. All right. Okay. Some positive numbers. So complete the function sum positive numbers such that it returns the sum of all positive numbers from the numbers parameter it receives. This challenge will help you combine some of the knowledge you acquired in the course. Take your time and make as many mistakes as possible. Okay. So we need to have an if-else statement. We need to have a condition that if a number is okay. If numbers first we need to loop it because it's an array. Number. So if number is greater than 0, we want to we need to have variable that is also 0, and then so if number is equal, so we want to sum plus equal number, and we want to return number. No, return sum, of course. So I'm doing a mistake, sorry. So if numbers for each number less. Sorry. But we still get undefined, and I don't know why. Because we were going through, right? So for each number, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I know. Fuck. Oh my god. So yeah, again, I made a mistake, guys. And I think it's because of this, right? I was like, oh, I need to go outside, but I'm inside the fucking callback function. You have to be vigilant, man. Alright, so we're gonna do this one. Sum odd numbers. So complete the function sum odd numbers such that it returns the sum of all the odd numbers from the numbers parameter it receives. So the function should also work for negative numbers. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is that we're going to, yeah, all the odd numbers. Okay, so numbers for each. So if x one, we want to x plus equal sum plus equal x, and we want to return sum. Yeah, it should work for negative numbers too. So see. I don't have something stopping it from. I'm just trying to think because I can, yeah, there are some numbers that are like, okay, so and x is less than 0. Yeah, I have no idea. See. Yeah, I used that reminder. Oh, oh, oh my god. Of course, 0. Didn't think about that. One or let's just see the answer. And it's not 0. Okay. So what we're saying here is that if x reminder of 2 is not 0, okay, whatever. Okay, so countries drop down. Yeah, I think we're gonna do that for the next video. So thank you guys for watching, and comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys soon. Peace.